collector, we want to be aware of what's going on in the environment around us, where the wind is, and if we have any blowing particulates and stuff like that. But as we approach the collector, I'll be carrying my sample box along with my clean bucket, my clean lid. It's recommended not to, because of weather conditions, take the field form out to the site. So I bring along a notebook, and that way if I have any notes that I want to write that I will later transcribe onto the field form, we will do so with that. So I'm on my way to the collector. I'm making sure that the wind is, I am downwind, so like I said, no particulates are going to blow off of me into the sample as we open the sample collector. So as I get ready, I'm going to open my box. What you want to do is when you expose the bucket, you want to make sure that you are prepared to put the lid on the sample bucket to try to eliminate the amount of time that you're going to have the sample bucket open. Like I said, I did not bring a field form, so I have a notebook that I will use to transcribe any information that I see about the bucket and the contents of the bucket and the sample. So what I want to do is I want to visually inspect. If you have snow or anything that's on top of your collector lid, try to do the best you can in removing that before you open it, because you got to remember, if you do not clear what's on top and you go to open it, the wind may catch the particulates, blow it into the sample. That's the kind of contamination that we try to avoid. So with the optical sensor, I'm going to take my hand like this, and I'm going to run my hand through the optical sensor 5 times, and the collector will open. As the collector opens, what you maybe want to do is to watch how it opens. And we will talk a little bit more about the opening and closing of the collector. But what's real important is once it has cleared the sample bucket, then if you look down, you can see the on-off description. Once it has cleared the bucket far enough, then we want to shut off the power. That has exposed the bucket, and we're ready to cap the sample. What you want to do is do a visual inspection. As we talk about moving the sample from the collector back to your laboratory, a lot of times the contaminants of the sample can dissolve a little bit as you're moving them from point A to point B. So what we would like you to do is to do a visual inspection of what you see. There again, being conscientious about being downwind. When you're viewing the sample, I know that, people, not myself, might be height challenged. I know that some of these collectors are up a little bit, so try to avoid leaning over the sample in any capacity, and you'll see that as a kind of a funny side on the video that we shot that's available online. So what we want to do is we want to make notes of anything that we see in the bucket. What we want to do is take the lid after we've done so and use the lid as a glove. You can pull, or the bag as a glove. You pull the bag back over the lid, and what it does is it covers your hand, making sure that your hand in no way, shape, or form comes in contact. As you pull it back, after we reviewed the contents, you pull it back to where the bag is over your hand. Now you can see that in no way, shape, or form will my hand become in contact with the bucket. So what I want to do is I want to lay the lid on there. What you try to do is you try to secure it as best as possible. Now see, I let go of that, and with wind or something like that, it would have potentially knocked it on the ground. So once you've got it on top of the bucket, you can take and lay both of your hands inside the bucket to kind of guide it around. Some of these lids, because of the cold or because of the newness, can be a little bit stiff. So what you want to do, to the best of your ability, is to try to get a nice secure fit of the lid onto the bucket. Are there any questions thus far? If you're unable, because of the pliability of the lid, to get a secure, seal on it, what you want to do is just take it and get it off of the collector, lifting straight up. And by then, you've already got your sample cap. If you don't all the way, lift it straight up off of the collector, making sure not to try to tip it or anything, and get it down onto the to the surface of the box that you brought out, and then go ahead and secure it all the way around, making sure that you've kept your hands inside the bag to try to eliminate touching the inside of the bucket or the inside of the lid. Now we have our bucket off of the in-con collector. This is the time where we want to go about and clean all the different areas of the collector itself. What you want to do is you want to take a paper towel. These are particular Chem wipes and deionized water. You can get deionized water at the grocery store or wherever you may have it. And I want to wet my Chem wipe. And then the first thing I want to do in the cleaning procedure is I want to clean my lid seal. That is the lid seal being the first because it's the one that comes in contact with the bucket when it is on the collector. So Brian, if you could zoom in a little bit. What we're going to do is we're going to back and forth clean the lid seal, front to back, making sure that we have it all nice and clean. We're going to talk about the way that the collector lid comes off of the bucket and settles down onto the splash guard here momentarily. So now I've got my lid seal cleaned. What I want to do is I want to go back and clean all the extremities of the collector itself. One real important, it's all important, but one part that is really important is cleaning the sensor grid. What you want to do, or the sensor itself, what you want to do is wipe the sensor down real good, especially in the U-shape, being a U-shaped. What you want to do is the optical parts are on the inside, so you want to get a nice, clean, concise wiping down of all the extremities. The posts, wipe those down as well before you put your next bucket on. If you have 4 or 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes in between when you took your bucket off and you put your next bucket on, that's not a big deal. We give that type of time frame for site maintenance. And our upcoming webinar that we will have in July will be entitled Site Maintenance, so this is part of what we'll talk about. So we're wiping all the extremities down and everything like that. We've got everything looking good. It's all clean. It's all wiped down. And we're ready to put our new bucket on. When we put our new bucket on, what we want to do is grab it. You can grab it just like this, making sure you have a nice, clear grip on it. When you put your bucket on, you may have a little residual water in the bucket, so we'll ask that you shake it off just a little bit. As we wash the buckets, they go through a washing procedure, but we are unable to dry them. We try to get out as much of the water as we can, but not necessarily able to get all of it off. So we're going to pull the bag towards us to where, once again, the bag will act like a glove covering our hand. So as we pull it towards us, like that, you can see where our arm and our hand is completely covered. If we have any residual water, like I said, shake it out a little bit, and then we are ready to put the bucket on the collector. Want to make sure that it's clamped down with our clamp. Everything looks good, and we're going to turn the power back on to allow the collector to close. Now, a real important thing to review when the collector is closing, once again, is look at the way that the collector closes, making sure that you don't have any herky-jerky motions, or it may not be coming back in a straight fashion. There are lid adjustments that can be made, but we'll talk about that. The way this collector works is when it does come to a close, it gets to a certain point before it settles down onto the collector. Sometimes with the gear, as it closes, you may see a little herky-jerky motion. Don't be alarmed by that. After your collector has closed, what you want to do is visually inspect the seal of your bucket all the way around. And you can view it all the way around. What we specifically want to see as we make the transition from one lid seal to another is to have, and I don't know if we can get close enough, but see the perforation of this, as it has a nice, clean, concise seal all the way around. That's what we want to see from all the lid seals that are on there. We're currently making the transition from taking away these particular lid seals and putting on a new lid seal, which is covered with Teflon. It's going to give it a lot longer life, but we will talk about that momentarily. Are there any questions? Take a time out for questions. Yes, we are going to do that. We have a specific type of bucket that we want to use for the in-con collectors. They are a bucket that is 10 3/4 inches. Before we started the in-con, we used to use a smaller bucket type as far as height goes. So what I want to do is I want to change a bucket with a smaller height, a shorter bucket, and show you the gap that you can get in between the lid seal and the top of the bucket. So I'm going to turn this back on, running my hands through the optical sensor once again. And I'm going to pretend I came out to the site today, and I'll make you aware of this with one of our attachments momentarily as to how to go about identifying the different buckets that you may receive. Like I said, specifically would like to have all the sites get in-con buckets, but from time to time, because of the inventory, you may receive another bucket that's a little bit shorter in height. We have a remedy to that. So this bucket is being taken off. We'll just pretend that bucket didn't exist and I was coming out to the site for the first time and I brought a bucket out and I recognize that this bucket is a shorter bucket. I'm still going to use the same protocol that I would use. This is a shorter one. We're going to put this on. We're going to try to zoom in on the lid seal a little bit so you can see the gap between the top of the bucket and the collector lid. The question is, how do I know it's a shorter bucket? I have an attachment I'm going to show here momentarily that will show you the difference between the two. You can basically tell the difference without a tape measure by looking at the rings on the buckets. And like I said, I have an attachment here. As we review after the sample change, we'll go through and you'll be able to identify them. So we have this new bucket on. We're going to turn the collector back on. And as it closes, I'll ask Brian to, once we get to a certain point, to zoom in on the top of this bucket with the camera. Okay, this particular bucket, and Brian, can you zoom in a little bit? What I have, if you can see it, is I have about a 1/2 inch gap between the top of the bucket and the lid seal itself. And I don't want to leave it like that. So at NADP, what we supplied are spacers. These are the spacers. And you put these on each one of the posts. So I'm going to, what we want to do before we do this is to always identify which bucket we got. There again, I apologize for not necessarily getting in-con buckets all the time, but with these, it's not a big deal. So what I'm going to do, once again, is open the collector and identifying that I had a shorter bucket before I put it on. I wanted you folks to see the gap. As the collector opens, what I'm going to do is put the boosters on each one of the posts here. And what it's going to do is it's going to raise the height of the bucket about a 1/2 inch. As I was saying, the shortest bucket we have is 10 1/4 inches. The next bucket we have is 10 1/2, and the in-con buckets is 10 3/4. The bucket I grabbed was the one that was 10 1/4, so I had a 1/2 inch to make up. And now you will see on each one of the posts that I've used these little rings to add a little bit of height. So when I do put my bucket back on there, and Brian, if you could focus in again, you're going to see that the bucket is not actually sitting on the white surface where it was resting. It's actually going to be resting on the post, and the height of the bucket has been elevated. So I'm going to let the collector close. Excuse me. Are there any questions up to this point? And I know that some of you, the question was, how are you going to know the difference? And I'm going to bring up an attachment here momentarily. Now that this is on and the collector's closed, I look underneath and I can see that I have a nice, tight, snug fit. If we can focus in on this a little bit, you may not be able to see it as well. Brian, let's go to the attachment called bucket heights, please. Okay, here's a sample or example of the 3 buckets that we have. The one that says I'm the shortest is the one that does not have any particular collar on it. It's just the rim of the bucket and then a little ways down, about 3 inches down, then it's got the ring that goes around it. The one in the middle is the one that we've had to put booster tabs on. You're going to have a ring in the middle, and then you're also going to see a little white plastic tab. 4 of those were actually put on the bucket in different spots, equal distance around the bucket, so that way it sat on the collector, the old Aerochem collectors, nice and firm, so where it didn't wobble around. The Encon bucket that says I'm tall, you can recognize by having the ring in the middle without the tabs. So that's how you're able to recognize it. When you get your big boxes in, one of the things that we recommend that you do is always to make sure that you open the box to make sure that you got, whether we send out a lot of supplies, if you're ordering supplies, that's how we go about sending them. So when you send a box in every 6 weeks, when you get 6 dirty buckets and 6 dirty lids, open them up and identify what you've got to work with over the next 6 weeks, and the types of buckets you have. Like I said, I'd like to get you the tall buckets every time. There are certain occasions where because of bucket inventory and our transition between going from Aerochem to Encon, we currently have, I believe, 87 Encon collectors within the network, so we're trying to upgrade our inventory, and that way every Encon will have a Encon bucket, but like I said, there are occasions where we don't have that. Are there any questions to this point? And if you look below, you can see an example of what I was just talking about, where I actually boosted the height of the bucket on the left, and on the right was a Encon bucket, so to speak. Are there any questions? Okay, no questions at this point. Let's go back to the main page and we'll go to our attachments, do a review. I highly recommend that you take 13 minutes out of your day to watch the video that was narrated by Brian Kirshner. Excellent, and it gives you a lot better pictures. I try to, go as slow and follow the video verbatim, but it's an excellent job of not only videotaping, but the narration and the step-by-step format that Brian followed in narrating. Sample change Encon, let's review it. All these are available. So we have our bucket, we bring our bucket to the site, we have our collector, we're making sure once again that there's nothing on the top of the collector lid that we want to see, that could possibly get into the sample, so we brush it off. You can use the bags, the bag, if you take your lid out of the bag and you want to maybe brush it off, you can use that. Being able to tell the difference between, go back to one, being able to tell the difference, that's also in the Encon sample change SOP. I'm shortest, I'm short, and I'm tall. Pictures, again, once of the bucket that had to be boosted and the bucket that did not. Putting our hand together, waving our hand through the optical sensor to be able to activate the collector. Reminder once again to make sure that the collector lid has cleared the bucket enough to where you can put the lid on without any potential contamination. We've got the lid on. We're going to secure it all the way around. One thing I did not do, and I'll go back to what you want to do. When you put your bucket, and see right now what I currently have is a bucket that's just kind of sitting there all by itself. As soon as you get the bucket sealed, put it back in the bag and twist tie it on the side of the bucket. That way if it does happen to leak, if you were to seal it on the bottom, then any sort of leakage could come out the bottom. Where if you twist tie it on the side, if it leaks a little bit, then the leakage will be captured in the bottom of the bag itself. We never want to pour anything that's in the bag back into the bucket, but we want to make note that we did have a little leakage during transport. Then when you seal up the bag, what's a good idea is to write your site ID and the time on, date off, time on, time off, and remembering that you can have that 5 to 10 minute buffer in between taking off and putting the next one on, so you can do your site maintenance and clean your collector like we talked about. What you want to make sure that you don't do, and we see an awful lot of, is overlapping, where if you take your bucket off at 9 o'clock, and we see some operators putting that say they put it back on at 8 o'clock. So make sure that the time is consistent and the dates are always consistent. We've got our sample secured. It's in our box. Make sure that all the information that you fill out on your field form, as I said, you brought your notebook along instead of your field form, any notes of contaminants. Reviewing once again that if you viewed what was in the bucket before you put the lid on it, that may not be there once you've transported it back. So make notes in your notebook as to what you saw, because that way once you get it back there, if it's not there anymore, we can pick it up and you make note of it in section 10, the remarks section of your field form. Cleaning the collector, make sure that the first thing you do when you clean the collector is to always start with your lid seal. You don't want to start with another part of the collector and then move to the lid seal, because any sort of contaminants, bird dung or whatever that you wipe off and then you wipe the lid seal with it, then that particulate and contaminant would be on the lid seal and be in conjunction with the next bucket that you put on. Put our new bucket on using the bag as a glove. Making sure to fill out every part of the field form. Okay. Let's move to a couple of the other attachments I want to make you aware of. As I said, lid seal changes. We're currently in the process of switching everybody over to the new Teflon style lid seal. The small plastic one, or the thin foam one with the impression I showed before. Go ahead and advance to the next. You'll see the difference. The new one is going to be of a Teflon, coated with a Teflon type of a wrap. On the underneath side, it'll have the direction that I want you to put it on. As you take the old one off, you will slide the new one underneath the clips and tighten the wing nuts on the far end, and then push that one up and get it underneath the other set of wing nuts on the underneath side of the lid, making sure that once you've got it nice and secure, that before you put it in contact or you put a new bucket on, that you thoroughly clean it with deionized water, because you're going to be touching it in changing out the lid seal. And this is a particular type of memo that will come with it. It's an instructional memo, but if there are any questions, don't hesitate to call and ask us. Troubleshooting. This is a troubleshooting guide. If you have problems with your in-kind collector, let's just let's talk about before if you lose power or something along those lines. It operates a little bit different than the Aerochem, where you could pop the clutch and move the lid. Without power, you cannot move the lid of this collector unless you disengage the lid itself. It's not an adjustment we want you to make, so you can go ahead and review this if you ever do incur problems. But what we do ask you to do is to call first, and we'll see if we can work through the procedures. Should be one more on there. And the adjusting the lid. When I talked about opening and closing of this collector, what you want to be real aware of is when you open the collector, as soon as you let it clear the bucket, then we turn the power off. A good test from time to time is to let the collector open all the way to the guard and make sure that you have a clearance of about 1 inch between the splash guard and the top of the lid seal. If the lid for some reason gets out of adjustment, we had a site most recently call about a week ago where their collector got a little bit out of adjustment and the lid seal came to rest on the splash guard, or the, I believe that's what you call it. Apologies if it's not. Where it was actually touching it, and that's not something we want because there's the sharp corners on this splash guard can cut into the lid seal and potentially contaminate the lid seal itself. So make sure from time to time that you let that open up all the way, see the kind of clearance you got, and watch it come all the way back. If it comes back and it's kind of wobbling, then we want to talk about maybe adjusting the lid. There's a shortcut or a attachment shows you how to go about doing this, but we ask before this ever be done that you give us a call and help you out with this. Are there any questions? Once again, on the home page that we'll go back to, the go.illinois.edu/NADP training not only allows you to watch this particular webinar, but it also lets you go back to the previous webinars that we've done and view those as well. Your comments are always appreciated. Try to do better each time. I know I talk a little fast sometimes, but I apologize for that. If there are ever any questions in regards to anything related to the site, don't hesitate to email us. The email address is on top of all your field forms, or to give us a call at 1-800-952-7353. I push once again for on the home page there, it says check out the Incon sample change video. I've been in radio a long time as a sidekick job away from this. The production that Brian Kirshner did on this, who's my curator and second engineer, was excellent. And I myself have watched it about 3 or 4 times because I wanted to try to pattern this webinar on how he went about narrating it and videotaping it. It is definitely something that I recommend that you watch.
What date would you like us to change out the new lid seal by?
The question is, what date would you like us to change out the new Teflon lid seal by? I've sent out currently 30 of the 87 lid seals. We started out by sending the Teflon lid seals to the sites who have had the Incon collector the longest. I hope to finish the manufacturing of these things by the end of June. I'm working on it, and we'll get them to you along with the change memo, and as soon as you get it, feel free to change it on the first Tuesday of your month when you wipe down everything and wipe down, do your routine maintenance and your sample change. Are there any more questions? Like I said, if this is the first opportunity you've had to join us for our webinars, we welcome you. Feedback is always desired and appreciated. I welcome you and hope that on a bi-monthly basis that you'll join us once again, and the information that we give to you will be helpful in becoming a operator that is more conscientious about what he's trying to do. Are there any more questions? I'd like to say on behalf of Program Director, we do have another question. The new seals seem to be a tad smaller than the old ones. I installed mine a few weeks ago. There isn't much forgiveness in the plastic seal. Talking about the Incon lid seal, they're going to be a snug fit. What you're really going to have to do is loosen up the wing nuts to where the clamp that goes from one wing nut to the other on the end of the lid itself will fall down, and you'll be able to kind of bend the end and tuck it up in there. Once you get it secured, it's going to be the type that's going to stay there and stay put, and you will not have to worry about slippage. I've tested every one of these things I've sent out because I pre-cut them myself, and I ended up ruining a couple pieces of plastic in measuring them, but I can assure you that each one that I manufacture, I put it on Incon collector lid before I send it out. So it'll be a snug fit, and do your best to work with it. If it becomes too much of a problem, let me know. I can send you another one. Where can I get the plastic washers for raising the buckets? I can send them to you. Make note on your most recent field form that you send to us, or you can call us, or you can email us, and I'll get it right out the door to you. Any more questions? I'd like to say on behalf of Program Director David Gay and Central Analytical Laboratory Director Chris Lehman, for my curator and engineer Brian Kirshner, this is Jeffrey Pribble. Thank you once again for taking time out of your day to join us and for your conscientiousness in continuing what has been a long-going project called NADP. Any questions, don't hesitate to give us a holler.